The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by a singer, songwriter, pianist, keyboardist, recording artist, accompanist, Mr. Dave Mackay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me. That's quite a list you've given me there.
Well, you do a lot of things.
I do a lot of things, you're right.
So, what is your purpose for the art that you create?
What is my purpose? I see all those things actually that you just listed, the various outlets of creative things that I do. They're all just ways for me to kind of express myself. So even if I'm accompanying someone or writing music for someone else, or if I'm doing, if I'm working on original music, I'd like to think that my purpose with any of those things is to be who I am, on the piano or as a singer or as a writer, and just to express myself for the sake of expressing myself, why not?
I think most stories are best from the beginning. If you could tell us a little bit about the part of the world that you're from and your background.
Yeah, I grew up in Leicestershire in England, which is in the Midlands, a couple of hours north of London. And, I grew up opposite a field of sheep. It's farmland out there in the countryside. For my 6th birthday, my parents bought me piano lessons. They could tell I had all the musical toys and I wouldn't leave them alone. So they kind of figured that I'd do well with some sort of instruction on the instrument. And they bought a book that compares your child's personality to different instruments. Because of the way I was as a kid, I was very, very happy entertaining myself, just very content being solitary. The piano is the perfect instrument for that because even though it can function in an orchestra or in a band or with other people, it doesn't have to. It's one of the few instruments that really stands on its own as a solo instrument. So they took me to piano lessons when I was 6, and that's all I've really done since then. I can't imagine ever not having started doing that. So I spent most of my life in Leicester. I didn't move around much until I was 18, and then I moved over to the US. I moved to Boston in 2009. Went to college at Berklee. And then I moved to New York City after that for 4 years. And then I actually just moved to Los Angeles this year. So I've been hopping around the US in the last 8 to 9 years that I've lived here. But yeah, that's where it all began, I guess.
Now, you mentioned that you were, according to this test, specifically perfect for the piano because you kind of like to entertain yourself. Are you still someone who kind of likes to work by himself sometimes?
Yeah, it's funny, as I got older, I specifically remember a moment. So when I was 12 or 13, I started going to music college in London every Saturday. So the Royal College of Music, it's a university through the week, but every Saturday they have instruction for under 18s. So I would drive down. It's about 100 miles from Leicester, where I live. So I drive down every Saturday and have lessons down there. There's a classical music college, and so I was studying to be a classical pianist, basically. All the methods and the techniques that would set me up for life as a concert pianist if I chose to. And I specifically remember a conversation with my piano teacher where she said, because I always improvised, I always played jazz, I was always interested in music that wasn't classical music, even though I was at a classical college. And she knew that, and she said, if you want to be a concert pianist, you can do it. You have what it takes. But from where you are now to doing that professionally it can be a very lonely existence because you really are practicing, 8-10 hours a day to get to the level of technique it requires. And then your life touring or recording it's just just you and a piano. And I remember in that moment, I must have been 16, 17 at the time, just kind of deciding for myself that that's not what I wanted, and that I wanted to make music with other people, and for that to be an integral part of my life. So it's a constant back and forth these days of feeling like I want to, underneath I still am very introverted. I still like my space. So I'm still drawn to that, but then I want to be able to share music and create music with other people. So I'm constantly back and forth. And I don't think I was ever, even though as a kid I was happy entertaining myself, like I said, I don't think I was ever destined to be a solo performer in that way, as a classical concert pianist. I don't think that was for me.
Tell me about the decision that you made to move to the States. What made you feel that was something you should do?
I think at the time, and it's a little different now, but at the time, if you wanted to study, so I'd done 6 years of this classical studying, orchestras, piano trios, like classical piano trios. I'd done that world of things and still wanted to play jazz and pop music and rock music. And, that was still what I listened to. And at the time in the UK, there weren't as many courses available at a high level to study those things. It's interesting how music education is different there, but if you want to do a serious course, you kind of wind up either doing a fully classical course or a fully jazz course. And there's not much that offers, really high level instruction and kind of a gateway into the real world of the modern music industry. I forget how I came across Berklee, but I went and looked at it, took a trip to Boston and I think I looked at Juilliard as well in New York and it just felt right. I auditioned for a few colleges in the UK as well and then had this decision of, do I want to move to another country? Do I want to, I'm a homebody. I grew up in the same house my entire life, so it was a big move. But ultimately, I think I did it because I knew if I didn't, I'd always be wondering, what if I'd taken that opportunity and tried it? So it was very much, I made the move thinking I'll go and do it and then go back to the UK. And, so many years later now, I kind of wonder where I left that idea. Because life just happens, I moved even further away coming out to California. But yeah, it was almost on a whim, I guess, that I came out here.
How would you compare the West Coast of the United States to the East Coast?
That's a good question. It's early days yet because I've not lived on the West Coast for that long. I was on the East Coast for 7-8 years. The main thing, I can compare New York and LA more easily. That's because of my time living there. New York has a really interesting, there's a quote, I forget who said it, but along the lines of, the time spent in New York is a time where you feel like when you're sleeping, you're wasting your time when you should be working instead of sleeping. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is I don't know, but it's an enriching experience to go through that. And I definitely felt that when I was there. I loved being in New York City. The way people behave there, the directness of people really suits me. But it's a grind, and you kind of, it's very easy to get in a funk there and just sort of be working away without knowing why you're working at what you're working at anymore. And LA, I feel, is a much more social town. People take more time to enjoy life as they're grinding away at whatever they are. At least in my experience so far. I do know out here, I know a lot of New Yorkers who moved out west. So maybe that's the bubble I'm in, is I'm around a lot of hardworking people who also are now, taking time to enjoy what they're doing more than they did in New York.
I want to ask you about your experiences as a vocalist. All the listeners out there can visit your website. It's Dave-Mackay, Dave-Mackay, and they can listen there to selections from your album Restart, which came out in 2016.
Yeah.
How did you learn to sing?
It's the newest thing I've started doing, really. When I was in school, I did have a few singing lessons. I learned a little bit of classical music, but it was never, I wasn't studying it at the same level that I studied piano. So I guess I had some foundation in it, but then I remember getting to Berklee and thinking I need to stick with what I'm good at here, because, you know, suddenly I'm surrounded by some really incredible singers. And it took, you know, the 3.5 years in college and then several years after to kind of get back to the feeling I had that was like, I just want to sing. You know, it's a part of me that had been dormant for a while, but that I still wanted to pursue. So I think it was halfway through my time in New York, I just, you know, I realized this. I had put out these other EPs with a band of instrumental music, so the piano was the focus, and a lot of the music I was listening to wasn't instrumental music. It all had singers. So I kind of just decided I need to explore this more, and I just, you know, I locked myself away in my apartment, and I could accompany myself well on the piano, and I set up a mic and I recorded myself and listened back and tried to figure out how to improve what I was doing, and just went kind of over and over that. And then at some point I sought out a vocal coach who really, the vocal coach I see at the moment, he's actually still in New York, but he's kind of taken me many steps forward that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. But a lot of the initial stuff was just kind of trying to learn my own instrument and figure out, you know, what I felt sounded good.
Who would you say are the songwriters, the recording artists that have made the biggest influence on your own work?
Michael Jackson, growing up, was a huge influence for me. I don't know how that really translates into my own work. I always think of him first as one of the first creatives who I just, you know, everything he did, I was just fascinated by it. You know, this is when I was much younger. I'd say directly related to my work, there's a Swedish piano trio, EST, which is Esbjörn Svensson. He died a few years back, but that, as a piano player, his work was really stand out to me, and I still listen to that all the time. Keith Jarrett, the more conceptually and what he did in terms of, you know, completely improvised concerts, that's the area of his work that I'm really drawn to. And similarly, Bobby McFerrin, you know, who I saw play several times in Boston, just kind of a life-changing concert experience of being present, you know, because nothing's prepared, it's all improvised in the moment. He has this ability to kind of unite a room full of people in a present moment, which I guess, you know, even though all these people I'm naming, they don't sound anything like my music, but those are the things that I'm drawn to, that I'm trying to achieve with anything I make. And more stylistically related, Sting is a huge influence. Muse, the rock band Muse, Toto. I could go on. I listen to so much music. It's all kind of in there in a big melting pot.
Curious what you think of Bruce Hornsby.
You know, a lot of people tell me that I sound like Bruce Hornsby, and I really haven't listened to much of his music to know. I obviously know the big hits, and I love his playing, but I don't know his solo work still. Now you've said that, that's enough people have told me that I need to go and explore. Still before my time.
A good place to start would be his album Halcyon Days.
Sure. Okay. Do you? I wonder why you asked me what I think. Does my playing remind you of him? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was listening to the album and I thought I'm wondering if Bruce Hornsby was an influence at all on him.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure subconsciously I've probably heard his playing in more places than I know. You know, and it's there. But yeah, I'll have a listen for sure.
So on this album of yours, I have stopped asking singers, songwriters, recording artists about a favorite song. You'll never get an answer to that. But
yeah.
I would ask you, on this album of yours, Restart, if you could pick one song as a representative of the album, which one would it be and why?
That's a tricky question. I would say the track Soldier, which is about halfway through the record. The record for me it's a transitional thing, right? The idea of it was when I decided, okay, I want to sing, I want to write songs, this record was my deadline for myself of like, well, how am I going to do that? I need to have a concrete goal that makes me follow through with it beyond, the realms of my own head or my own, being in my own apartment singing. I needed something that would give me a reason, because I think that's the only way you can really learn creative skills is, it's no use rehearsing for hours and hours in a practice room if you never actually get on stage, because everything's different when you're putting what you do in front of people. And the same is true, I think, with recorded work. A song feels completely different when you play it to someone. If you sit all day listening to it yourself and then you get someone in the room and do the exact same thing, it feels completely different because it's suddenly out of your own head. So the album for me was, the idea of restarting was, I'd already kind of been releasing music as an instrumental artist and had set this path for myself, and it felt like a restart to say, okay, well, now I'm going to be a singer. So Soldier was the first track that I think the first track I wrote for the record, and kind of just encompasses for me all those feelings of, it's a song about self-worth, self-belief, believing you can overcome a challenge for yourself, broadly speaking. So even though there's a lot going on stylistically in different tracks, I think that's the one that thematically would represent what the album means to me.
I was hoping that you would say Soldier.
Yeah? Okay,
yeah.
Good.
I thought it was a very interesting song. I liked it.
Thank you.
As we mentioned at the top of the interview, one of the things you do is play, of course, with other artists. And it's a pretty diverse list of people that you played with.
It sure is.
Tell us about some of them.
Let's see. Well, at the moment, I tour with Art Garfunkel. I've worked with him for the last couple of years. And that's one of the few jobs where I actually get a grand piano on the stage, and I really get to play my instrument. I don't know if you've seen his show or if you know the tour he's doing at the moment. But it's an acoustic show. There's Art, there's a guitar player, Tab Laven, and then there's me on piano and keyboards, and that's it. There's nothing to hide behind. So, which is a beautiful experience musically. You have to be present. You have to be committed to what you're playing. Other artists I've worked with, it's very different. I toured with Grace Weber, who's a up and coming soul singer. I toured with her while I was living in New York for a couple of years, and that was very different. There's a full band. I was playing electric piano, organ, and Rhodes mainly on her music. And then some of the other artists I work with, it has just been, a one-off TV performance where they've been in New York, and I'm kind of drafted in to just do a couple of performances. But I love so many different styles of music. So none of them feel, there's not like one is better than the other. They're just all kind of different avenues. Although I will say I love having a grand piano in front of me. It's a treat every show.
If you could pick an artist that you have not worked with, at least not yet, that you think you would most be able to create something meaningful with, who would it be?
I mean, I can selfishly answer the question by saying who I'd love to work with, which is Sting. In terms of creating something meaningful, I think that question has to be mutually agreed on by both parties, right? So I don't know if you feel the same way. He doesn't know me, but yeah, I would. He's one person who I'd just love to create with. Although I don't know if he's looking for a keyboard player. If you know him, let him know.
Maybe he's listening.
Yeah, right.
So how did you meet Mr. Art Garfunkel?
I started working with 2 years ago. I was called in to cover some dates in the UK. So my first shows with him was Hampton Court Palace in London. We played the Bath Pavilion. And then we were headlining the acoustic stage at the Glastonbury Festival, which for me, obviously, growing up in the UK, that's one of the big bucket list gigs to play is Glastonbury. And it was, I think, Art's current keyboard player can do those shows, and he called his friend Kim Bullard, who plays for Elton John. And Kim's a friend of a friend, so I got a phone call one day that said, do you want to fill in these shows? And I agreed. And an hour later, Art's on the phone with me, and he didn't ask too many questions. He just sort of said, "I played you great. Do you want to come and play these shows?" And a few weeks later, he came over to my apartment in New York, and we rehearsed, and that was it. Now here we are, 2 years later, 100 shows later, however many we've done.
What do you find his personality to be like?
He's a very sweet, caring human who's very... What I love about Art is that he's intent on giving his audience a good show. He's really committed to perfecting. And the show hasn't changed much since I've been working with him. It's mostly the same set of music, but we still dive in and find imperfections and try and give a better show, which I think is... So I guess to answer your question more specifically, his personality is he's a perfectionist, which is great, I think.
Do you like the experience of traveling as a musician?
I love traveling. Yeah. I mean, there's a side of it which is a drag, when your flight's cancelled or delayed, or, you're stuck in traffic driving to a gig, or you spend a lot of time in an airport, a lot of time in a hotel room. But so far, I really love it. It's an interesting thing to always be on the road. I've recently realized that it's very easy to kind of put off certain things in your life and say, well, I'll do this when I get back home. I'll start eating better when I get here. I'll start doing this exercise I want to do when I get here. And it's very easy to constantly be putting it off because you're always going to a new place. So I'm really trying to live the full life I want to live anywhere I am, whether I'm in a plane going somewhere, or whether I'm home in California, or, with family back in England. So there's a challenge to it, of course, but I love it. I love seeing the world and being in a different place every other week. It's so fun.
Do you find yourself being homesick?
Not really. When I first moved to Boston, I really was. My whole family, I have brother and sister who both have kids, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, they all live all in Leicester, they're very close to one another. And then I'm the only one in the family who's all the way out here. So when I first moved away, I did struggle with that, but I think I'm so used to it now. Just, especially living in cities like New York and LA, where everyone is traveling and coming in and out of the city and touring. So it all feels just like this strange transitory journey that I'm on. And I get to go home. I'm back in LA enough to feel home here, and I get to go home to England enough times a year to feel, connected. And obviously, things like FaceTime and Skype really help. I can't imagine what this experience would be like without the kind of technology we have to keep in touch, around the world. It makes a big difference.
What do you hope to accomplish, or you aspire? What's the dream for the future with Dave Mackay?
I would love to, for me, because I enjoy making my own music and I enjoy working with other artists, I think what I aspire to do is to find a true balance of the two, where I'm consistently reaching my own audience with my expression and, being a part of another artist's expression, because anytime I do one and not the other, I feel like something's missing. So I feel I'll always be doing both. More to answer that more around my own work, I think I would like to, I don't know, just leave a unique body of work that represents who I am, which is this kind of mix of, I have all these different interests in different styles of music, and I come at the piano from a unique place. I think most people who study the kind of work that I did on the piano wouldn't wind up playing rock shows. But I love that's kind of where I wound up because it reflects what I'm interested in. So I think just to kind of hone in on those things and be more of them, you know.
So what is the best thing about being Dave Mackay?
That's a good question. I feel very fortunate. You know, I've been on a crazy adventure so far, and I'm young. You know, I'm only in my late 20s, so I feel I've seen a lot of the world. I've shared a lot of music with a lot of people. I've met a lot of great people, and I've made friends in all these different corners, you know, in all these different countries and all these different cities. So I think, I don't know, I'm a happy human. I think all these things are the best thing about being me. I don't know.
Anyone out there, they can visit the website. Again, it's dave-mackay.com. And thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Now, for us to close, I want to more or less give you the microphone. Incredibly open-ended. Whatever you'd like to say to our audience.
Oh, wow. Well, if you are inclined to go to my website and listen to my music, thank you. I appreciate you listening to what I do. I'll be on tour for most of the rest of this year with Art Garfunkel. So, you know, check out his tour dates. And if you are inclined to come see the show, it'd be great to see you. And there'll be more. You know, I'll be putting out some original music, some new songs later this year. Best way to find them is on, you know, Apple Music, Spotify, Bandcamp, and on my website. I have a mailing list on my website as well if anyone wants to keep in touch with what I'm up to. And yeah, see you out there in the big wide world.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to explore your work and what you do.
Well, thank you. And likewise, it was great to chat.
All right. Till next time.
Yeah, thanks.
The Paul Leslie Hour is hosted, produced, and written by Paul Leslie for Lifestyles Entertainment. For information, visit thepaulleslie.com. Thank you for being with us. Until next time.